Hello and welcome again to our Texas Magazine, the podcast. Today we have the fabulous, the truly wonderful Cheryl Smith. Now, you may not, if you're not a journalist, maybe you've read her stories from time to time, but here's additional information about her. She is publisher of the Messenger Media News Group, which includes three different platforms. One is the Texas Metro News, another one is the Garland Journal, and the other one is the Messenger. We'll talk more about them, but what I wanted to, hello, Cheryl, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. I'm just glad you're here, okay?
Yes, good.
All
I'm
right.
glad to be here and glad to see you.
Well, thank you. Now, from time to time, now, Miss, I call her Miss Riley. I call her Sharonda Riley. I call her Dr. Riley. I have all those names for her, okay? But I'm letting you know she's co-host, but today she's trying to do the producer because Michael Foster has COVID. I'm sorry, has the flu. So he's unable. See, I told him, hey, take a rest. So she's multitasking today, okay?
Well,
But
we thank her and a shout out to Dr. Riley also.
absolutely. So a couple of things, Cheryl, and that is to talk about how the Black press reported on certain stories that you thought were either interesting or important.
Wow. Overall or just in this past year?
Well, let's just focus on this year and whether it's all of Texas or if it's the North Texas area.
Okay. Well, and I have to take it national to bring it back local because we suffered with it here also.
Yeah.
And that is coverage of politics. And it was definitely skewed. And we definitely, when you think about why you became a journalist and what you wanted to be. And it was an honorable profession. When people say, "Oh, I'm a journalist," they're like, "Wow," And then all of a sudden, we became up there on that list of when you think of professions that are the least trusted. You're up there with car salesmen, used car salesmen, and attorneys. And folks were saying journalists because they could not believe what they were reading or hearing or seeing. And Public Enemy talked about it back in 1989 and talked about don't believe the hype. And then you fast forward to over 30 years later, and the hype is out of control. And it was out of control nationally. You had the person in the White House, what people say is inarguably the most powerful man in the country and in the world, the person who sat in the White House, and he was making disparaging comments and remarks, and just in how he treated journalists.
Chief Piper.
Yes, and talk about the stories that he put out. Now, I can tell you this, and not agreeing with or disagreeing with him, but there were complaints that he made about the media that the Black community made years, decades ago. We've talked about things, but um, folks went crazy, and you just saw how people reacted to certain media outlets and what information was being put out there. And Jamil, we have always been held to a higher standard in any profession, but in journalism, you had Black journalists who didn't want you to know they voted, didn't want you to know they went to church. It was like you can't live a normal life if you're a Black journalist working in the so-called mainstream media,
Yes,
which I thought was really crazy.
yes.
And the fact that we were able to buy into it, and so there were probably those who thought, "Why is Cheryl working with the Black press? She's crazy." Well, there was certain freedom that I had,
Mhm.
and then I could tell the stories, and I did not have to bring my story back into a newsroom to either a white editor or a misinformed Black or brown or Native American or Asian um, journalist. to tell my story. So that's why I stayed and wanted to be with the Black press, not because I couldn't get a job anyplace else, which people like to put that narrative on you. And so, when you look at the coverage, I bring it locally and look at how races were going and how stories were skewed. And I can tell you that there are some things that got better because of COVID, and there are some things that got worse.
Uh-huh.
And there we have folks who are just plain lazy, and they figure that to do a story that you go and get person A and then you get person B, and you make sure you have both of their sides in the story. Well, what about the rest of the alphabet? What
Yeah.
about the research that you're going to do? You don't let them just ride in with their narratives, and you make sure all the information is out there. But folks blamed it on COVID, and some of these same folks who are blaming it, getting out and doing a story on COVID versus going and um, quoting what somebody said on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or whatever. They had an issue doing the work, but then those are the same people who see pictures of them in Mexico or in Paris or different places. They could manage to get past COVID to go and do those things.
Yes. Yes.
And instead of covering the story. So I saw our coverage suffering tremendously, and which was the case. There were several newspapers who said you need to come back to work. They said they needed to come back to work because people were not being productive. I was one who said, bring your butt into the office. For some people, I had new interns who had never worked a full-time job before. They were clueless, and I saw it in what I was getting on the return and my investment in them. So I said, we're setting up protocols, but you have that whole office to yourself. Come in here, let's track what you're doing and help you to grow. And so when I look at some of those stories that happened, and I look at who was covering and who was out there, we suffered tremendously. We suffered tremendously with the coverage. We've lost a lot of people, and I was talking to someone last weekend, and I said, yeah, because I'm figuring that they up on things, and I was like, yeah, we lost um, former city manager Richard Knight and businessman Marvin Robinson and former judge Larry Barack. And he said, wait a minute, when did we lose Marvin Robinson? And I was like, well, that happened last month. And then they're talking and they said, well, I don't know, yesterday I was at Joe Bell's funeral. And I said, Joe Bell, when did Joe Bell,
Yes. Yes.
and 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 that is why the Black press is so important, because we used to cover from the rooter to the tutor. We covered from the beginning to the end. You knew when someone was born and every step in between, and don't let one of us go away to college or stuff, or when we get married. And we didn't do as much divorces, but
Right.
we definitely did that.
Yes. And they were important to our community. Other people may not have recognized their importance, but we knew that they were important. We knew that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I went to Florida, and it was Florida, oh gosh, Florida Sentinel. I'm thinking I was in Tampa, and people were waiting on the streets for it to come out on that Thursday because they wanted to see what was going on in their community. No one covered. And that's the type of, that's why I love the Black press, because you're going to get some stories if they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Yes. Yes.
You're going to get stories you would never get, you never hear of. And that's really important. That's why I like us to get back to the problem, however, is that the people you're doing it for don't always appreciate or value, especially since they are able, like I tell young people about the Black college. Well, if it was good enough for your mother, grandmother, and great grandmother, Why isn't it good enough for you? Do you not realize that it's if you don't love you, if you don't fall in love with yourself, if you don't promote yourself, I think that there are some people who clearly believe that, this God, Cheryl keep talking about how great Florida A&M is. It must be great. Well, guess what? They won't hear me say anything else, so all they could do is take my narrative and run with it.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what, with the black press, we've been hit. Now, I want to go back to you talk about coverage, but let's just even think about what immediately happened um, when COVID hit. Some newspapers had to close down. Some had to scale back on their printing. Some people didn't have to scale back on their printing. They had to cut out printing altogether and go strictly digital.
Yeah.
All kind of things.
I know the I'm trying to look for the word. The word is, there always is a too short a time to talk to you, but I wanted to hit at least two other things, and then this will not be, okay? This will not be the last time you and I talk, either Zoom or in person, okay? Now, two things. One is, how do you see the black press covering the criminal justice system? Do you think that it covers it the same as city newspapers, white newspapers, or do you think it covers it differently, especially opinion pieces?
Well, the opinion pieces are better. I will say they're getting better and better because everyone has an opinion. Interestingly, I had to tell people shorten what you write because I think with COVID, folks just, they just had so much. I said, no, we can't run 1,000-word commentary. We can't run a piece. The system, there's a there's a definite void right now overall, and we have to do better. That's why I say collaborations are key because we don't have the coverage. We need to make sure that people understand. Uh, I could tell you there are so many stories inside of me, inside of my head that
Yes.
I cannot get to because of resources, because of bandwidth,
Yeah.
and sometimes you just get plain tired.
Yeah.
And then we could have a whole show and talking about what's coming out of our schools because some we're getting out. Um, we the industry has changed so much, and it's more about celebrity.
Yeah.
And I try to tell students that, and that I can't make you a celebrity, but I can help you do work that will be celebrated. And there is a big difference. So
There's a
you're
big difference.
thinking, that no, let's do some work. And don't come in here if that's not what you want to do.
You know what? Yeah, you probably told them something that a city or a white newspaper would not say to them. They wouldn't even broach the subject. They wouldn't even broach the subject.
Well, I called Jim Washington, publisher of the Dallas Weekly,
Yeah.
and I told him, or former publisher, because his son Patrick is
Yeah.
working
Yeah.
there, and I said, Jim, you owe me reparations. And he started laughing. He said, what you talking about? I said, well, I'm just thinking about, the 1980s and Cheryl Smith walking into your office telling you, let me show you what I can do. And I, if I had a Cheryl Smith to walk into my office now and do half of what I did for you, I see how invaluable I was to him
Yeah.
because I'm in that position where if I had a Cheryl Smith, if I had someone who, then we wanted to show you, so we didn't have to deal with imposter syndrome because we showed you what we could do. But
Sure.
now you have people before they show you what they can do, they're trying to make sure you paying them what they want, not what the industry
Yeah.
calls for, not what their skill set or their academic background or anything calls for, just what well, it's not about what I deserve, it's about what my car note, my house note, and all the rest of it. What what it costs to get my hair done and my nails done and all of that. That is what, um, is being presented. And so, I just said, gosh, if I had those people that come in, that want to do the work and in anticipation of rewards and in anticipation of growing.
Yeah.
And I said,
Yeah.
so, you know,
Yeah.
you need to pay me.
Yeah.
You need to pay me. You need to find me another Cheryl Smith and someone. Unfortunately, we built a culture where people are constantly um,
I think we may have frozen. So again, this is a wonderful episode that we've had with Cheryl Smith. Thank you so much. We'll talk again. Happy New Year. Bye.